What are you and your fellow SNP MPs going to vote for? What do you want?
Well, what we want is that we want this to be put back to the people. And look, I understand, Julia, that people are very frustrated that we're almost 3 years on from the referendum. And quite frankly, at the moment, we're no clearer in terms of where we're going to end up. And there has been a monumental failure of leadership from the Prime Minister. She's failed to get her deal through quite spectacularly twice. She seems to want to gravitate towards no deal if the Commons is not going to support her deal. And I think quite rightly, Parliament said, look, we need to reflect on where we are. We need to look at where the options are. We need to look at where we can build consensus. And, I have to say, in this time of concern, and you can feel that. You and I were on Newsnight a week past Thursday. Question time, sorry. And you could sense that there was anger in the audience. That
a very divided, very angry audience.
Yeah, on the other hand, 1 million odd people, some people say more than that, in the streets of London.
Well, no, actually, the crowd experts reckon it was about under 400,000.
Well, look, I don't know. There was a sizable number of people. Some people say 1 million. Who knows? And in many respects, it doesn't matter.
I say 5 million.
Right, okay, look.
Let's just make up numbers.
Hang on. The point is, there was a lot of people there. There was a fantastic atmosphere, a lot of young people. We need to stop and reflect on where we are. We need to understand why people voted the way they did in 2016, but more importantly, we need to try and see if we can find a way through this. And I continue to make the point, I don't think there is such a thing as a good Brexit. I could do that from the point of view of the economy, but socially, culturally as well. And I think it is right, given where we are, that the population of the United Kingdom are given that opportunity to have a say.
Do you understand why an awful lot of Leave voters listening to this will say, well, hold on a minute, you're talking about building consensus and we need to reflect on why people voted the way they did. Leave voters know why they voted. Remain voters know why they voted. You're not going to build a consensus between people who don't want Brexit and people who do want Brexit. That was why we had a referendum 3 years ago. That referendum was decided in the same way that Scottish independence referendum was decided a few years earlier. That should be the end of the matter. We could have consensus if people like you, MPs like yourself, actually continued to work towards delivering the outcome of that referendum.
Yeah, but here's the problem. The Prime Minister called an election in 2017, thought she would come back with a stonking majority. She didn't. She came back as a minority Prime Minister. You've got a situation, I think, two things. One is that she has never sought to work across Parliament. She's never sought to build a consensus.
But you wouldn't have... No. What consensus would you have built with Theresa May trying to deliver Brexit? You don't think there should be Brexit. There is no consensus to be built there. That's dishonest.
But no, it's not, Julia, because the job of any Prime Minister is trying to see how she can actually pull together the majority that was there for Brexit and those of us that had voted to remain. Now, the Scottish Government have published many papers over the course of the last 2.5 years. The first one in December 2016, and we called it Scotland's Place in Europe. We presented to the government that we ought to have that compromise of a single market customs union. But the point of that is we were trying to engage with the Prime Minister who was failing to engage with us. Now, even if I take it back to last Wednesday evening, now Wednesday was quite an emotional day.
That feels like
it feels like a long time ago, but it was important because we had the letter from the Prime Minister to the European Council. We had Donald Tusk's reply. And I think at that point people were saying, look, no deal is a serious proposition at this stage. And the Prime Minister called opposition parties together. Jeremy decided he wasn't going to play, but the rest of us turned up. So myself, Vince Cable, Liz Saville Roberts, Caroline Lucas and so on and so forth. And I sat in front of the Prime Minister and said, look, you know what we're asking for? But given where we are prepared to sit down and work with you. You're not going to get the ERG on side as things stand because they now smell no deal. You've got that opportunity to try and work across Parliament. She either wouldn't or couldn't do it. It was quite extraordinary.
I don't think there are many people who would defend Theresa May's handling of this or her leadership on this. But look, the Liberal Democrats, the SNP and the Greens, I mean, you all stood at the last general election on manifestos basically saying, we don't want Brexit to happen. We're going to try and stop it from happening by hook or by crook, whichever way. They've been honest. Now,
through a vote, which is a democratic way of doing it.
Through a vote, yeah, but you were very honest about that, of course. But 85% of people in the United Kingdom voted in 2017 for parties, Labour and the Tories, who said they would deliver Brexit. So when you talk about consensus, we constantly talk about this need for compromise, for consensus, and there's lots of hand-wringing by Remainers like yourself. But actually, when you say you want compromise and consensus, it's all in sorrow, not in anger, isn't it? What you actually mean is not Brexit. What you actually mean is a version of Brexit that is so Brexit-light, it's actually Remain
But
Plus.
there's another problem I was going to come on to, that we have got, in essence, what has supposed to be in Parliament a two-party system. The system is broken because you've really had an outbreak of civil war in the Tory party. Arguably, you've had the same thing in the Labour Party. Neither of these parties can actually really cope with this.
Yep.
Our politics are broken. I think it's probably fair to say that Britain is broken. So how do these two political parties cope with this? I had talk this morning of an election. I'm not sure how these two parties could fight an election.
But you would
vote
in a vote of no confidence in the government, if that was brought by the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, you would vote with the Labour, would you not?
We laid a motion of no confidence before he did, but,
well, exactly.
but he is the one that
okay,
we would do, because I would relish an election.
You would relish an election.
Clear.
There is always a possibility in this election, especially what happened in 2017, that Jeremy Corbyn and Labour Party could win a general election. At which point would you, the SNP, be willing to work with Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister?
We will work with anyone in order that we can achieve a progressive alliance across the United Kingdom. Well, look, but one of the things which is key, and also you appreciate I'm doing this as a Scottish politician, and I'm asking the people in Scotland to reflect on what is the chaos in Westminster. And I think it is becoming increasingly clear, if we want to secure our own economic future, then that has to be as an independent nation. And I want the people of Scotland the right to be able to choose their own future, because circumstances have changed post our referendum in 2014.
You want to have a second referendum on Brexit because you also want to have a second referendum on Scottish independence.
Well, we want to have the right to do that. But one of the things, Julian, I think it is perhaps for your listeners throughout the UK is interesting, is that the Scottish Parliament is elected in a completely different way to the elections to Westminster. We have a proportional representation system. It's done in a way that it's supposed to stop one party getting a majority, albeit we did it once. And so parties have to work together. We have to get our budget through. We have to get support from other parties. And it's quite a contrast with what's happened here. And look, you know that I support Scottish independence, but I did accept the result of the referendum in 2014. We then moved forward from that and asking for more powers for the Scottish Parliament to make sure we were delivering in government in Edinburgh. If we do have a referendum on Scottish independence, and it's an if at the moment, the one thing that we would want to do is have that big tent, and it would be a discussion on the values of the type of society that we actually want. And I think these are the things that are missing from this debate down here.
Okay, but realistically, if there were all these votes that are coming up, a vote to say, I mean, you voted Remain in 2016, you voted against Theresa May's deal both times it's come to the House. You voted against a no-deal Brexit, you voted against the Malthouse Amendment, etc., etc. So in the votes that are going to come to the House tomorrow, realistically, will you vote to revoke Article 50?
There's very strong support which is coming to revoke Article 50, and of course it's Scottish politicians
so would you vote for
that got that right. What I will say to you is that I think we have to be prepared to support revoke, but what I want to do is have that opportunity in the first instance to see if we can create that majority for a second referendum for a people's vote. But if it's no deal, if we're being faced with no deal, then I will move a motion for revoke, because we need to stop the UK crashing out of the European Union with no deal, which I believe would be disastrous.
Can
and
you
I think
imagine
it's important
a
that we give
scenario
that leadership.
If there were a second referendum in Scotland for independence, or where you had won in 2014 and it was accepted, it was a narrow victory, 1 or 2%, and the establishment worked to stop that outcome being delivered? Would you not think the level of anger that would be expressed by independent supporters in Scotland would be totally justified in that scenario if the establishment was stopping the outcome of that vote being delivered if you had won it? The reality is that is exactly what is happening to Leave voters in the United Kingdom right now.
What I want to do is make sure that people are given a vote. The issue about revoke is very, very simple. I had a briefing from the government yesterday on Privy Council terms as to no deal planning, and of course I'm not allowed to talk about the detail of that, but I can tell you it's pretty sobering. The government themselves have talked about the risk to medicine supply, the risk to food supply.
They've actually since said that the Health Secretary said there are no issues on this. Royal College of Paediatricians said there's no issue on medicine concerns.
The government's Treasury analysis, which was published last November, painted a picture that if we were looking at no deal, there's a potential loss to the economy of GDP of up to 10%. Now, nobody knows if it's 8, 9, 10%.
Or
But
none
the point,
at all.
well, no, it would be significant because we know that from the claims of many companies that they would look at their investment considerations, the auto companies and so on and so forth.
The point is, that's nothing to do with Brexit. And
no, Julia, you can't say that because there is.
They've said it. I'm not saying it. They've said it.
There is no.
Yes.
Well, I'm afraid that's not quite the case because Nissan have pulled their investment in the UK. But look, there is a threat to the economy from a no-deal Brexit. It is going to have a substantial impact on living standards and on jobs. And the job of any politician is to protect their constituents from economic risk, to consider economic security.
Well, let me put this to you then in relation to that, is that actually there were predictions from exactly the same Treasury that if in the event of Scottish independence there would be a hit to the Scottish economy because, of course, the Scottish economy is hugely reliant on trade with England and the rest of the United Kingdom, far more so as a percentage of its economy than the UK is reliant on the EU.
Is anybody really saying we won't trade with the rest of the UK for independence?
Well, exactly. Trade happens quite regardless of whether governments are making trade deals or not. It carries on happening anyway. Why is it that you think it's perfectly acceptable to tell the Scottish people it's okay to take a massive economic hit by being independent of the United Kingdom, but you think it's a terrible, terrible thing for the UK as a whole to be independent of the EU on the same basis?
There is no rational analysis that shows that we're going to be better off with Brexit.
There's no rational analysis that says that Scotland would be better off independent.
I'm afraid that's not true because the whole thesis that we want to build is an independent Scotland that will be prosperous, that will be more socially just. I want to be able to deliver higher economic growth in Scotland. I need to have the control of the levers of economic power in order to do that. We will, when the time comes, we will present a white paper where we'll go into that in detail. The Growth Commission report that was published some time ago talks in detail about the opportunities that there are for small countries and us getting to the average rate of growth of small countries in Europe and indeed around the world. So there is an opportunity. I'm not saying it's a land of milk and honey. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. But there's that real desire.
It's worth it for independence. It's worth it for independence.
Yes,
why do you not understand that for the UK?
But there is a world of difference, and let me explain why. If I look in the rearview mirror and I look at Scotland's economic growth over the course of the last 100 years, then it absolutely saddens me that our population 100 years ago was 4.8 million. It's just shy of 5.5 million today. We haven't grown over the course of the last 100 years. And the whole thesis of what we're doing around what I would call the 3 Ps. So it's about productivity, it's about participation. And it's about having that right to be able to bring in migrants from the other parts of the world, because we cannot grow the Scottish economy unless we have that ability to suck in talent and labour from elsewhere. So it's an entirely different proposition that Scotland, as a destination in Europe, our place in the world, one that's outward looking, whereas the UK that's seeking to take itself out of the European Union and withdraw from that. It's an entirely different concept and proposition.
Let me ask you one final question because we're tight against time, but you described Theresa May after her speech to the nation last week, which angered so many MPs, as Trump-esque.
Yeah.
Do you stand by that?
Oh, absolutely. And, I have to say to her that I thought that statement last week was really ill-judged. I mean, we talked about the anger that you and I saw when we were on the BBC Question Time programme. And I think for the Prime Minister to say she's on the side of the people and all these members of Parliament are standing against the people, and you've got MPs like Anna Soubry can't go home because of what's happening to them, I just thought that was a mistake. I thought that was actually really quite ill-judged. And I'm saddened that the Prime Minister thinks that is a way that a Prime Minister should behave. I just simply think it was wrong. And she was given the opportunity. I asked her yesterday to apologise for that, and she isn't strong enough to be able to accept that she should have done that.
OK, Ian Blackford, we'll have to leave it there. Westminster Parliamentary Leader of the Scottish National Party MP, thank you very much indeed.